Hopefully everybody can see me, and there's some people tuning in or will tune in at some point here. Um, I'm Daryl Frazzetti, and this is my public page, and I decided to go ahead and start doing some live streaming on it. Um, what I'm calling it is my weekly Geek to Geek open forum on my Facebook, my public Facebook, my Dr. D page. And so anybody that's here or will be here or maybe joins us in the future if they see this video, that's awesome because I'm hoping that we can use this forum to just, be fans, maybe not so formal, not so academic-y as I am maybe at the conventions. At the conventions, anybody that's seen any of my talks or seen any on my YouTube knows that what I do is I teach special topics courses in things like Star Trek, which was my first course, and of course anthropology of aliens, anthropology of Lord of the Rings, Middle Earth now it's become really, and anthropology of science fiction, which is running this fall at Western Nevada College. Anthropology of science fiction. I'll put a plug up there for it. Where's my camera? There it goes. We're going to be running, if you want more information on my anthropology of science fiction, it's Tuesday nights, starting October 17th, running for 6 weeks, I believe, through 11/21, and it'll be a 7 to 9 p.m. class. Not very expensive and a lot of fun. I love running this one every once in a while because it really opens up the flood, everything that's science fiction. The course, unlike some of my other courses, although I'm dying to run aliens again, this one really looks at all kinds of topics through science fiction. It's an anthropology course that covers four major subdisciplines in anthropology: archaeology, linguistic anthropology, cultural anthropology, certainly, and biological anthropology. There's some science fiction stories and handouts that I use that look at the issue of human origins and human evolution through time. So it's a really fun class. The other thing that I also include are some science fiction stories that deal with what I refer to, it's a field known as applied anthropology. So looking at how science fiction encourages us to make changes, get involved in our world, and work towards those changes that we want to see happen. And that's really what applied anthropology does. It's action anthropology. It's using that anthropological understanding of cultures and differences, and also concepts about cultural relativism, to help us intervene and make changes in the medical field, the legal field, the educational field, to policies and programs, or even create new policies and new programs depending on the population or the ethnic background or cultural background that we wish to serve. And so all of that's included in this anthropology of science fiction course. So really, this covers, let me get that back over here again. This covers all those areas of anthropology. And the nice thing about this, unlike Star Trek or Firefly, which I have that course as well, this is open to every single medium of science fiction. It includes literary science fiction, TV, and of course, film. So this is a real broad range use of science fiction to explore various cultural topics and concepts, as well as looking at how we use science fiction to bring about change in our own world through action that science fiction may propel us to take, even on the level of our local community. So I think it's a great course. If you're interested in the course at all, again, it runs Tuesday 10/17 through Tuesday 11/21, 7 to 9 p.m. here in Carson City, Nevada at Western Nevada College. I will flash that up one more time because this video will stay archived, and maybe next week I'll get some people that want to come in and chat. But I'm here until 7 p.m. Pacific time with you. And it's a very hot day here in Carson City. I didn't geek out too much with my clothing. I'm just wearing a very light shirt and kind of hanging out in the kitchen with my tea. I do love tea and coffee very much, and of course, an appropriate mug for the evening, my Batman mug. So hopefully everybody's doing very well. Of course, I can also be reached, by the way, at dfrazzetti1@gmail.com. That's DFRAZETTI1 at gmail.com. Again, if you're interested in something like the class, I will put that aside. The class that really started all the special topics I've ever taught, including the one on Star Wars. So there's been an array of classes I've developed and taught over the years. Started in about 2006, but the first class that was ever developed was Anthropology of Star Trek, and that came about in the most unique way. The cats, my first cat, and then of course Junior, who's still with us today, going to be 21, and his brother Jasper were in Trekkies 2. My first cat, Garfield, was in Trekkies 1, and of course his Trek name was Bones. And Jasper had a Trek name because we dressed him as a Klingon, and his Trek name was Captain Claw, which was interesting for a cat, so I thought that was a good fit. And then, of course, Junior took over the McCoy uniform. Anyhow, going through that over over a decade, and then, coming out of school with my degrees and looking for work, I was hired initially up at Lake Tahoe Community College to teach anthropology of Star Trek more than anything else, although I taught other courses in biological and other disciplines in anthropology. But that's what started me on the pop culture track I'm on today, because I was hired to teach a special topics course in Star Trek, which I worked on for 3 months and developed and, had a good time with. We had a great turnout for that first course. That first course was an amazing experience. We had several guests even come to the college. We had Roger Nygaard. We did a Trekkies night with the films. We had Rod Roddenberry come out and speak to the class, which was a really awesome evening. We all went out for dinner and had a good time. That was a big event at the school. And also Richard Arnold, who had come out and did a lecture for the class. As it evolved, it ended up online, and then we even took field trips to see Warp 11 concerts, and I had students working on ethnographic reports on the experience. Actually, that even goes back further. Like I said, I'm keeping this very informal. I'd like to have an open geek discussion, and even let some of my fan side out with some of my thoughts on things as a fan, which I usually don't do at conventions and don't do in class. But I'm looking at the bigger picture and the academic side of things when I'm in class or when I'm at a convention. I don't feel that it's right to invoke my fan biases into a more formal or a more in-depth exploration of topics. Anyhow, that's what the Open Geek Forum's about, so we can have some fun and kick back. And again, I'll be running this every week. But let me go back to the initial thing that I did long before I ever graduated from Northern Illinois University back in 2003. I was teaching while I was in school, I was teaching at this community college in Illinois called Kishwaukee College. And I was teaching a 4-subfield class. So basically I covered all 4 major disciplines of anthropology, which would be your cultural, your biological or physical, your archaeology, and your linguistics. I also would always throw something in there for applied. Some people recognize it as a 5th subfield and some do not yet. But moreover, it's become a legitimate 5th subfield. It's action anthropology. And there's a lot of anthropologists employed in the medical field, public health, corporations like Chrysler, General Motors, and so on and so forth, looking at workplace culture and policies and program changes. So anyhow, that's a little bit on applied anthropology. But when I was teaching part-time in Illinois, I had this 4-subfield class, and I was down in the computer lab one day because a Star Trek convention was coming to the Chicago area. And I was just looking to get tickets to go. So I was online printing my material out. Gosh, I went to conventions as an attendee for years, from the time I was about 12. And somewhere right about there in 2003, 2004, I started volunteering at conventions. And that was a lot of fun as well. By 2007, I was a guest speaker at conventions. But going back to Illinois, I was teaching this 4-subfield course, and I was in the computer lab one day, and I was printing out material for the Star Trek convention that was coming to Chicago. And one of the students from that course happened to see me at the computers, and I know I talked a lot of Trek when I was in class. I even used examples from Star Trek when I was in class for various things when we were doing the cultural section in that course. And so he looked at me, and of course I used some of the Trekkies footage when I was teaching about ethnography and looking at a subculture that was not mainstream in order to get people really just focused on the work at hand and not a particular contemporary group where there may be biases towards those groups in the class. So I used a harmless group like the Trekkies, showed some footage in class, and of course everyone knew that I was indeed a Trek fan. So that they all joked and giggled, and that kind of a reaction. And so there I was in the computer lab, and I was printing up my material for the Chicago convention. And this one student from the class came up to me and says, "You really go to those things?" And I said, "Yes, I really go to those things. This is my social life." And then he lost it after that. So I just looked at him and I said, "Well, would you like to go with us to the convention? You can come with me, and we'll put together a group if you want." And before you know it, I was in the classroom shortly thereafter talking about it the next day, and mentioned that he was going to the convention. And I said, "Well, how about I create an extra credit project?" And so I opened it up to the class. I created the project, designed a rubric for it, and handed out an outline shortly thereafter for students that were going to the Star Trek convention. And we went online and got our tickets, and we put together an ethnography study at the Star Trek convention. This one guy in class was fantastic. He was wonderful. He was walking around with his little notepad and real serious, going up to people, asking them different questions so he could take notes. He was actually conducting interviews of Star Trek fans. So I'd say it was a real worthwhile project and turned out to be a lot of fun to do with that class. And really right along, I mean, it's really probably a natural transition for me to walk into being asked, "Hey, would you develop a Star Trek course for us?" Um, moving out of biological anthropology and into the world of pop culture was certainly a transition for me. And again, that initial Star Trek course took me 3 months to develop and work on. It got easier the more classes I was asked to do, or then, on my own decided to write proposals for. It got easier every time around, and it's been a lot of fun. Initially, it was very difficult for me to make that leap from my biological background to a more cultural type of environment where I was doing cultural analyses. I hadn't really been trained in that. My background was straight biology, and then, of course, biological anthropology and infectious disease analyses of skeletal remains. So that's my background. I've done work for the state of Nevada at the State Historic Preservation Office. I've also put together zoological collections, so collecting dead animals, roadkill, and preparing them for the collections. That's always been a great fun thing for me. But I'm straying again on that subject. Hopefully, people will see my video post or jump in here this evening. But we're about 15 minutes into the discussion. So again, this is what I've decided to do once a week on Saturday evenings from 6 to 7 p.m. Pacific time. And it's called Geek to Geek. It's an open discussion on all things geek. So comics, science fiction, gaming, anime, cosplay, whatever you want to bring to the discussion, a very informal discussion, and we can be as fanish as we like. We can also talk about the deeper if you like. I do want to introduce this book to people that are unfamiliar with it. This was a result of that Star Trek course. It's my Anthropology of Star Trek textbook, exploring core cultural concepts. And really, I think it came out last July, and I know there's quite a few people who've purchased copies, either online or from me directly via email, which can be done as well. If you want a discount on it, please email me, again, dforzetti1 @gmail.com, or message me here through my Facebook. And I'd be happy to help you get a copy at my cost. That's not a problem at all. And hopefully somebody will play this video later when it archives and hear this and say, oh my goodness, we better flood Frazzetti with some requests for books. I do have them at conventions with me as well for sale. I have a special convention rate, which is about $6 off. Then of course you're saving shipping if you don't purchase online. But anybody that sees this video, of course, and would like a copy, I'm happy to do that for you. Really what this book is, and I wish I'd hear from more people. One person did post one review online. Again, Anthropology of Star Trek. I'll try to get this in front of the camera. Exploring core cultural concepts. So that's my current book that's been out and available. I have other books that I have written, primarily in biological anthropology, especially my evolutionary biology of primate textbook that I've used in classes when I've taught. Hate to say it, but I've been one of those people that uses their own book in class. I've used it as a supplementary text, and I put it on reserve more than anything else. I didn't feel right requiring it as the only textbook in the class. I like to be a little more unbiased than that when I teach, especially human evolution courses. But yeah, this book is, and I've published quite a few articles through various online sources, as well as contributed book chapters to other textbooks. What I've done with this book is included all that work I've ever done on fandom culture and Star Trek, which still, gosh, there's still some burning questions I may go back and look at and start writing again once my Batman project's over with. But I'll talk about the Batman project again in a few. But the anthropology book here on Star Trek, and I wish I would hear back from more people with some feedback if you've got my book. So, if you have it, please, I'd love some feedback. Of course, no big surprise that I've dedicated it to all the cats in my life. But really what this is, if you take a cultural anthropology textbook and you replace all the contemporary images, contemporary references, examples, and so forth, case studies and so forth, with Star Trek, that's really what this course is, and that's really what I've done with this book. Really, the introductory part of this, the first couple of chapters, reads just like a cultural anthropology text. The thing is that I needed to have readers become acquainted with what anthropology was and the methodology behind, anthropology, the theory and method of anthropology, cultural anthropology, and then explain how Star Trek and anthropology relate and why it's a great source for anthropological writing. And then that's really the first chapter of this entire book, really, is understanding anthropology through Star Trek, and also looking at ethics through Star Trek, and ethics through Star Trek as they relate to anthropology. And then my first section really is about Star Trek as a cultural teacher, and looking at concepts like race and ethnicity, all the things you couldn't really teach in a classroom without some pushback from students. There's some things, political issues, religious issues, gender issues. All of those things Star Trek has covered in depth, and they make for wonderful examples and wonderful teaching tools in anthropology. Notice, of course, when you're teaching about race or you're teaching about ethnicity, as we have here in Chapter 2, you don't have that pushback the way you would perhaps otherwise, because this is a safe medium. Science fiction allows me to introduce these concepts in a safe way, and no one feels offended. No, they're too busy laughing at me, wondering what it is I'm doing. I did this one time, as a matter of fact, in the language and culture class. The topic coming up was going to be on language and really the evolution of cultures. And so I'm looking at the evolution of language through the evolution of cultures. I had a section I needed to cover on the relationship between the Hebrew and Arabic languages. Well, as we know, that can be a very hot button issue. And there were students, and I knew the class pretty well. I mean, I knew that this could, upset some people, cause some comments to be made that would be inappropriate, perhaps, make people feel uncomfortable. So I created a slide set that first introduced them to the Romulan and Vulcans, and the relationship between them and their languages, really. And then they were just stunned by me. Hmm. Excuse me for a minute. Anyhow, they were just stunned and taken aback, and so I've caught the students off guard, and they're just wondering what I'm doing with the Vulcans and the Romulans. Well, I went into it in a very serious way, and it was my lecture for the day. As soon as I completed all of that and we went through it in class, well, then again, I jumped right into what I really needed to cover, which was the relationship between the Hebrew and Arabic languages. Anyhow, getting back to the textbook, of course, I cover, the prime directive. That was probably the toughest chapter I wrote in the entire book, looking at the prime directive. And of course, the prime directive in anthropology is very much the same. It's a hands-off regulation, ethical regulation that anthropology carries with it, meaning that we don't interfere or judge, in any way the other cultures that we may be studying at any given time. And so it was wonderful to write that with Star Trek, but at the same time also quite challenging. That was probably the most challenging chapter in the book for me. Looking at Federation politics and linguistics and religion, it was really hard to decide which ethnic groups or which other cultures I would draw on, because Star Trek just had so much for me to draw on. And then, of course, we looked at myth, and Star Trek is myth, but science fiction is myth, and the role of myth in human society over time. And then again, applied anthropology was a fun section in this book, because Star Trek has done so much to inspire so many people, so many fan clubs, so many groups in Star Trek, Starfleet included, Starfleet International. If you're not familiar with that, that's the International Starfleet organization that models itself after the actual universe, Star Trek universe. And it compels people, propels people, inspires people to not only go into great, career paths perhaps, but inspires them in their personal life to want to make change, even in their own neighborhoods in some way, make differences. So using Star Trek and how it's inspired people to do even small community service projects was a great way to use Star Trek to explain applied anthropology in this book. And then, of course, the work that I did studying Star Trek fandom culture, I also went ahead and included in this book. That was about 3-4 years in the making, just that particular chapter alone. Star Trek fandom is a very valid, very vibrant, very diverse culture, and just as complex as any other culture you'll encounter. And then, of course, I went ahead and talked about fan film remakes, some of the music groups that we know that are Star Trek based, and it really came out to be a fun project overall. So I'm hoping that at some point, I know there's a lot of copies that have been purchased. At some point, it'd be nice to hear from some people and get some feedback on the textbook. And I do appreciate the people that are coming up to me at the conventions and making purchases, still interested in the book and wanting to talk Star Trek. And speaking of Star Trek, we've got Star Trek Discovery coming out. I believe the air date now is September 24th on CBS All Access. And there's been a lot of banter about, how good this series will be, how the trailers have been, casting talk, and all the usual fan chatter that surrounds the new series coming out in general, and in particular surrounds Star Trek, because fans I've noticed fall into two categories. You've got your purist Star Trek fans, and they stick very closely to what they feel is Star Trek canon and what the meaning of Star Trek is to them, particularly coming out of the original series. more hardcore purist type fans, I think. And that came through in the survey and the fandom culture work that I had done. And the existentialist Star Trek fan is someone who's more flexible, who accepts a variety of interpretations as Star Trek. There have been people that have come into Star Trek fandom through the new movies, and whether or not you've accepted the new movies, the alternate timeline, whatever your feelings were about the new films, it has done a great deal for the franchise. It's brought in new fans. Um, I know a lot of fan films that have brought in a lot of new fans and have really kept the franchise afloat with fan interest. And of course, the fan films have fallen back under the gun with CBS because of some of the things that have happened recently with profit making by some of them, and so that crosses the line from being an amateur film to more of a professional work. And of course, I don't want to get into any legalities or legal discussions, but there's some great fan films out there. They're online, they're available, and they really have done a great job of infusing life into the franchise. Some of the novels as well. So the existentialist Star Trek fan tends to be more accepting, more open to looking at different things that use the label Star Trek than the purist type fan may be. But in looking at Star Trek Discovery, I've seen quite a few of the trailers, and I've been on the fence about it myself as a fan. I'm hesitant to trust CBS as a fan, and I think sometimes with good reason, but then I look at some of these trailers. I've read, dozens of articles at this point, and I've tried to make my own, my own opinion of all of this. I will say this from speaking to Rod Roddenberry a couple of weeks back here in Reno, when we were all together doing the Be the Astronaut event at our Challenger Space Center we have here. I was on a panel with him, and we also had a whole weekend of film festivals and a showing of his Trek Nation and discussion on Star Trek Discovery. He's billed as the executive producer. He brought some trailer material with him during our luncheon, and he seems very positive about it. He's been reassured that it will maintain the integrity and the values of his father. So he seemed pretty optimistic about it. The trailer material that he brought actually looked great. I mean, I got the feel that this was that kind of Star Trek, that it was about the human condition, about the human journey, what it means to be human, all those important questions that Gene Roddenberry was putting out there really seemed to shine through in these bits and pieces of trailers that we were shown that day, and in some of the trailers I've seen online. I've also had interesting conversations with various friends through Messenger and Skype and so forth, even texting on Star Trek Discovery. And I'm going into this at this point feeling that, we need to give it a chance. It airs on CBS All Access on September 24th, I believe is the date. I put that on my calendar. And we'll see what comes of it. But I know, too, that any series, really any series, maybe sci-fi more so than anything else, takes time to find its legs, to find its grounding, really to develop your characters, to develop some stories, to develop maybe that chemistry between the characters, to tell those stories. So we will see what we see, I guess, on September 24th when Discovery airs. The other thing about streaming and another subscription service, CBS has their own streaming service, so of course they're going to want you to subscribe to that. It looks like it's the subscription rate is $5.99, which for one show doesn't really seem worth it, especially since a lot of us are subscribed to Netflix and Hulu. I have Netflix and Hulu. I also subscribe to Sling TV. I have their basic package because I just couldn't be without sports totally when I cut the cable cord, and I finally found a way to do it. Sling TV offers me three ESPNs, TBS, and TNT. So I get my fill of baseball in particular, and the NBA and some NFL. So I'm very happy with having Sling TV. But if you're paying for Netflix and Hulu, how likely are people to pay another $5.99 to get CBS All Access if all you're really going to watch is one show? So it may come down to this being somewhat problematic in terms of being, an inhibitory factor for some people being able to watch the show. And if it is a decent show, I'd hate to see that be the thing that really hurts it. I was at Sack Trek, oh gosh, 2 falls ago now, and Tim Russ was there as one of the guests, and he was talking about his project, Star Trek Renegades, I believe it is, which is a fan film, and their Kickstarter campaign to raise funds for it, and the online streaming and what's happening with Star Trek and science fiction in general. And he explained it in such a way that, you really felt bad for science fiction, but you got it. You understood that, science fiction on network TV hasn't always historically done well, or well enough for what the networks want to see, But I'd say today, science fiction TV shows probably have a better shot at drawing that audience for the networks, the audiences that the networks want to see, more so than maybe 5-10 years ago. So I don't know why they didn't just go ahead and try to get it on network with their network lineup, but it will stream. And Tim was talking about how difficult it is for science fiction to make a profit. And that's really what it's all about with the networks and the film studios. And particularly we know with CBS. And the whole history of the Star Trek franchise, with Paramount and then of course CBS. So we'll see, but I think Star Trek Discovery definitely is deserving of our time and at least attention and a shot through, maybe the first few episodes to see what they do with the show. I feel very more positive about it, having spoken to Rod about what he's heard about Discovery, and watching the trailers that he brought with him that day here in Reno a couple of weeks ago. So, Star Trek Discovery, definitely give it a shot. And I think my knowledge has been that the first episode will air on CBS regular TV for free, and then from that point on, it's a paid subscription if you want to continue watching the series. So we'll see how it goes, and I think that's nice that they'd at least offer the first episode for free. It's taken them a lot of time to work out so many issues with that show, but the trailers look good, and the word from people on the inside that are involved with the show, people that I've communicated with personally, either online or in person, it all seems to really make me think that this is going to be a positive experience. Now, I do have one friend that his complaint is that the problem with Enterprise was that it wasn't looking forward. Science fiction needs to be looking forward, not backwards. So to have done a prequel series like Enterprise was disappointing all the way around. And he doesn't think that Discovery stands a chance because of the same problem. They're fairly limited because how much can you really add? It's basically another prequel to the original series. And so in a lot of ways he made some good points. I think it, like Enterprise, will have some constraints, but I also think it's an opportunity to fill in gaps and explore some new stories. Enterprise, I enjoyed a lot of Enterprise personally as a fan. Now, so you won't hear this at a convention or in class. Only here on my my open forum, my open Geek to Geek forum. But so I'll let my fan side out from time to time here. Well, probably more often than not. But Enterprise, to me, I loved it, and I've been rewatching it on Netflix. And they did a lot of fantastic ethical dilemma type episodes, a lot of exploration of humanity and the human condition. I thought it was always done fairly well. Um, Enterprise, to me, was a great series. So, despite any constraints it may have had, being a prequel type series to the original series, I didn't really pay attention to it. And I've been trying to watch for it now as I've rewatched the series. I think one disappointment for me was the final episode of Enterprise, where we did not, we didn't get to see the formation of the Federation, which I thought should have been the focus of that episode. And the cameos that Marina Sirtis did and Jonathan Frakes did, to me, were unnecessary and distracting from actually seeing what was about to unfold. So I would have liked that done differently. But I did like the series. And, if people play this video later, hopefully it'll spawn some discussion. I mean, please feel free to post and tell me I'm an idiot, for liking that series. I did not. My two favorite series, and I suppose I could rank them all in order, which would be original series and Enterprise are my top two. And then I would say DS9 would be my third favorite. I've gone back and started rewatching that again. Every once in a while I do, but DS9 holds a lot more value to me these days than it did, I think, in the first run, and that may just be because I'm older and look at things differently. I think it's too bad that they rushed the ending of the war at the end, but script and time constraints, the show's ending, and you got to kind of wrap it up. So it's just a little rushed in that respect. But other than that, I mean, it's a blow-away series. So for me, my tops are, in order, original series, Enterprise, and I got a real soft spot for Enterprise, and DS9. Those are my top three. And then where would I put the other two? I suppose I'd go with Next Gen in fourth, and then Voyager, which, as a fan, I haven't really latched onto. Oh, there goes my, I'll shut that off. That's my bat phone there. I'll just shut that ringer off and apologize for that interruption during my chat hour. I should have just lowered the volume. But I've got a Batman ringtone on there. I swap my ringtones around from time to time and the themes on my phone from time to time. Anyhow, enough about Star Trek and the anthropology class and the anthropology of Star Trek textbook. Again, I see somebody's watching, so that's nice. If somebody wants to comment or get in touch, please feel free to replay this and look at all that information. Let's see, what else is on my little list of... I just got back from Hydra Comic Con. That was last weekend in Santa Clara, California. That was their first convention. They run Kraken Con as well. And I have to say they were an excellent staff, and it was a really fun convention. I didn't get to... I tried live streaming for the first time, and I forgot to put it on my professional page, my public page here. I put it on my regular Facebook. And, of course, it was difficult only because... And I've transferred those to YouTube at this point and posted the links here on this page. But I'll tell you, I set up the camera. I had it on the little stand there on the table with my laptop, and of course, the PowerPoints are to my far right when I'm standing there, and so when I'm moving, nobody could hear me talk or see the PowerPoint. So I think next time I'll use the tripod and move it kind of to the center of the room to try live streaming. So that was my first shot at trying live streaming. And I'm finding I actually enjoy it. So that's why I decided to launch Geek to Geek Open Forum. I didn't even give a history of that. I feel like I'm doing Sheldon Cooper's Fun with Flags here, and I should have a flag waving around someplace. But Geek to Geek open forum discussion was born out of a crisis at the Reno Sands Comic Con back, I'd say 2014 was the first year they got to 14, 15, 16. Yeah, 14 I think it was the first year. I've been doing that convention every year now, and it's gone from a one-day show to two-day show with a great Friday night events. If you're in the Reno area, September 23rd and 24th, the Reno Sands Comic Con. Feel free to Google it, Reno Sands Comic Con. Great event. The guy that runs it is outstanding. Really nice guy too. I've met so many great people that were fans that decided to start running conventions. I like that. I like their style far better than doing the corporate conventions. But yeah, so it was Reno Sands Comic Con, and 3 years ago, and I was giving a talk. It was a one-day show. I was giving a talk. I was scheduled for Anthropology of X-Men, or Cultural Imagery in X-Men. 1 hour talk. So I go in the room, I set up, and we're talking X-Men. We're going through all the ins and outs of, cultural imagery and, humanity in X-Men. And, oh my gosh, it's so riddled with social issues. I need to actually develop a whole class on X-Men. That would be fantastic, because we need a whole semester to discuss it. That and Firefly would be great to have as classes. You know what? That's a good idea. I have to make myself a note about the X-Men one. I'd love to do that along with the Firefly one. I mean, even when I've done Firefly at SnafuCon here in Reno, 2 hour time slot, we're still talking about it. So, some great topics that would certainly do well in an expanded semester form. Anyhow, people have class suggestions. Please send them to me. I mean, I'll develop the classes. The college is open to running them. But back to the birth of Geek to Geek. I apologize for that stray there. But it was Reno Sands Comic Con 3 years ago, and I was in there doing my X-Men talk when Steve Wyatt, the guy who's the promoter for the convention, comes in and comes up to me and says, "Hey, can you cover a second hour? Just keep going, because we just lost a guest to a crisis." And oh, there's Kat. Hey, Kat, somebody's here. This is nice. Now, how do I get my little so I can talk to you? Oh, there it is. Okay. Let me see if it'll let me do that. Will it let me, do things with my cursor and like you and do things? I'm glad somebody's looking at this video and watching. I'm hoping this goes every single week. This is my new joy in life, And it's good to see you here. I so want X-Men. I wonder if it let me type. Oh my gosh. Anyhow, X-Men, and I have to bring back the Firefly. We did do Firefly once over the summer about 4 years ago, and it hasn't run since. But I will go over there and talk to them about getting it scheduled. Now that I've got Sci-Fi running again this fall, I so want to do more. But yeah, we've got to develop an X-Men class. I just did X-Men at Hydra Comic Con, and my gosh, I mean, I could have a whole week of class just on William Stryker. Never mind all the other stuff out there. I mean, there's just not enough time in the world to cover all the social issues in X-Men. And the biological, because I get into the genetics of the mutants, and I get into things like genetic engineering and designer babies, what we're doing with, oh, what do you call them? Prosthetic devices, bionic eyes, ears, so on and so forth, and some of the ethical issues that we face with our technologies today. So, I mean, X-Men is great for so many things. Yes, so thank you for posting that. I will definitely I'm making myself a note about my X-Men. So I've got my pen, I'm making a note. And I think people would love it. And all I got to do is follow the outline on my PowerPoints, write up my proposal, and bring that over to Linda Whitehill at WNC here in Carson City. Anyhow, I know pretty soon I'll be giving out her email address and her phone number, and people will flood her with requests. That'd be awesome. But yeah, that was what I was doing at Reno Comic Con, and then I filled the second hour, so we kept going into the second hour. But towards halfway through it, people brought up so many other issues, identity politics in X-Men, and use of the term Gifted. And of course, now we've got the new TV show coming out on Monday nights on Fox this fall called The Gifted. And that's where we got off discussing the issue of identity politics in X-Men, and groups that think they're special and try to promote the interests of that group politically. I don't believe personally that's the underlying theme, the underlying cause of X-Men, given the comics history and the diversity they've tried to pull in and portray. A comic that was launched, during the civil rights movements. Note I say movements because there've been so many, all piled into that piggyback of Max struggle, and we have so many social issues that are civil rights issues today. So X-Men is just phenomenal material. So yes, I've made an official note. I will write a course proposal and I will send it in to Linda Whitehill and get that hopefully maybe even for spring, because I see now Kat's got me thinking about it, so now I'm salivating about an X-Men class. That would be great. So thank you for posting that. Hopefully other people will see that and see this later and also comment. And again, so I was at Reno Comic Con. Now I'm into hour 2 because of the guest that had to cancel. And then this was 3 years ago, of course. And then, we're in the middle of hour 2, and Steve Wyatt comes back in the room, and he comes up to me and interrupts for a second. He says, "Hey, can you keep talking? Well, another guest has had a family crisis." And so we've lost 2 guests now. So really, my talk evolved from X-Men into really an open forum where we were there for 3.5 hours talking about all kinds of stuff. I mean, pick the show, pick the film, pick the comic. We were in there just having a great time. I probably could have kept going, but after 3.5 hours, I really wanted to go use the restroom and have something to drink. And so I asked people if it would be all right for me to cut it off finally and go back to my table. And then people came and saw me at my table, and we kept some of the discussion going, which was a lot of fun. Then I loved every minute of doing an open forum. I really did. It's one of those things that's unplanned, and it just takes on a life of its own, and you never know where it's going to go. So I started promoting it to conventions as an open geek forum, and it needed a title. So Geek to Geek was the name of the panel that developed. And of course, I also was doing an ad lib kind of. It was a rainy Saturday when I was out at Lodi a couple years ago for Grape City Comic Con, which was a one-day show. And since it was pouring in Lodi, it was like a January of a couple years ago now. It's been 2-3 years on them now too, but and it was right after this thing in Reno. A few months later, I'm out in Lodi, and of course, we go over Donna Pass. I took a friend with me, and we're covered in snow and rain. We get to Lodi, and it's just downpours. Well, they needed someone that could just have open discussion with everybody that they kind of corralled into this big auditorium area until they could open the doors for people and form lines and let people into the show hall areas. So I just got up there and started chit-chatting, and before you know it, we're talking about everything you could imagine out there. We were talking about some games, we were talking about Legos, we were talking about some of the animated stuff out there. Not so much anime, but animated Batman, and we got off on talking about Gotham, which is always a favorite topic of mine to get off on. So it just went everywhere, and it's not anything you set up with a PowerPoint or have a note card for, no agenda whatsoever, and it's just a lot of fun to go out there and just do. And so I started formalizing it as Geek to Geek, and that's the title of the panel, and several conventions now over the last few years have actually accepted it, and I've gone out there and we've just had a ball with an open geek forum, talking about things like, female fandom, feminist issues in fandom, and in some of these franchises. Of course, that's been it now. Now, see, I'm off on that topic, and that's how Geek to Geek kind of goes. I mean, we just go wherever it takes us, you know. But the topics have just been all over the place: science fiction literature, female fandom issues, female merchandising by franchises, and so on and so forth. Of course, you know, now that I'm thinking about it, I've got that before I close, I want to make sure I mention a couple of things coming up for me, other than the science fiction course at Western Nevada College, which, let me get my little flyer out here again, which is, oh, there's my camera. I'm not real great with live stream yet here, or backwards. You know, Western Nevada College, which is coming up 10/17 to 11/21, 6-week course here. If you want information on the course or registering for the course, you know, definitely get in touch with me through here. Your messenger is fine as well. But August 2nd, I'll be at World of Wonders Museum in Lodi, and that's August 2nd. It's a 6 p.m. Science evening, and I'll be presenting women in science fiction. I also plan to do some coverage of Wonder Woman and females in comics as well. So it'll be a blended talk of women and women's issues, female fandom issues, and so forth, and a little history to, you know, the people that paved the way in science fiction, the women who've paved the way in science fiction, and all their contributions, and the women of comics who've done a fantastic job, and how things have changed for female fandom and even merchandising to the female fan. You know, there has been progress made, which has been phenomenal, and I think, you know, much needed, and there's still a long way to go as well. And speaking of the female issues, I did a panel at Hydra Comic Con on Wonder Woman last weekend, and I mean, it just really amazed me at some of the reactions to the film when they did an all-female showing. You know, Alamo theaters across the country had a night where they would have one theater set aside, have only female employees, you know, present on site, and they had a female-only showing of Wonder Woman. I mean, they were very generous about it. They also said that anyone who identified as female, so I'm guessing they referred to the trans population as well, and said, hey, if you identify as female and you're female, you come on in. This is your showing. This is for you. This film is for you. It's a fantastic film as well. By the way, sidebar, I love Chris Pine in Wonder Woman. I have never been a fan of his as Captain Kirk. So that was my sidebar on that. But the women-only showing sparked quite the controversy and the protests, and had men screaming, you know, sexism. And I'm just, you know, my eyes are rolling in the back of my head. Said, are you kidding me? You know, do you know anything about the history of men and women here on planet Earth? You know, so I found that interesting. You know, history of men and women, you know, even in the United States, the feminist movements and so on and so forth. I mean, it just blew me away that a female-only showing of Wonder Woman could stir up this much of a protest, and had men screaming sexism. Now, the theaters did offer options for other people to go and see the film. And, you know, what's interesting is that they do have, you know, groups that get to do things. Hey, this is a special showing for veterans, or a special event for veterans only, or, you know, discounts for, you know, veterans only, and things like that. And nobody flinches. Nobody starts screaming. Nobody pickets. Nobody starts putting nasty sexist posts on Twitter. There were some really wild things I saw. And so I'm really just amazed at the response to Wonder Woman and a female-only showing. So that's an issue I still want to explore. Hopefully, maybe we'll get some people in here next week, and we can have some discussion, perhaps on feminism and comics and science fiction. Again, August 2nd, I will be at World of Wonder Museum for Science Night. And that's in Lodi, California, 6 to 9 p.m. I will have copies of the Star Trek book with me for sale. If anybody wants one, you can also contact me here, and I'll work it out online with you. Um, and the other thing coming up, of course, is Reno Comic Con, September 23rd and 24th here in Reno at the Reno Sands. I'll be there as well. And they put on an excellent convention. We've only got a few more minutes left. I'm doing a 6 to 7 p.m. talk. And I started a little bit late, so I'm going to go with my timer in the corner here and use the 5 minutes I have as opposed to the 1 minute on the actual clock. But cosplay has become a real interesting topic for me. I've been following along, with the fandom culture studies. After I did the Star Trek one and published the book last year, I took a little bit of a break. And I'm going to give a talk last January at a convention on the history and evolution of cosplay and how cosplay differs here in the United States from cosplay, say, in China or Japan. And it's all become quite an interesting topic to me because I'm noticing a lot of things about cosplay. I've started working on my Batman fandom culture study. One thing I noticed about the Star Trek survey was I asked a question about what do you feel is deviant behavior for your culture. And the majority of fans reported that dressing in costume constituted deviant behavior in the Star Trek fan culture. And I found that interesting. I put it on the back burner for future reference and probably an article at some point now because I'm working on my first article for Geek magazine. So when that comes out, I will certainly post links. And it will focus on the ins and outs of cosplay. Because a lot of things are going on with cosplay right now. Now, the same thing has happened with my Batman survey. I posed the same question to Batman fans, and I'm getting a majority of people who say dressing in costume is deviant behavior in our culture. So, I'm not sure why that is. So that's something I plan to explore and write about in the forthcoming article for Geek magazine. I've noticed, though, Dr. Phil had a family on who has a son that's in his late 40s, lives with them at home, doesn't work, steals money. I mean, pick it. It's going on. And he does some elaborate costuming, including his Batman outfit when he goes out and does his vigilante thing. So, but he's getting into, this is the kind of person that gives cosplayers and fandom in general a bad name. And it was definitely someone that you would look at and say, well, that's definitely deviant behavior. But that's general deviant behavior. There's some great stuff going on. The guy that's the Asian Superman, and did he go too far? Having surgery to look more like Superman. But his social actions are fantastic. He's out there doing something good and positive for the community he's in, and he's not Superman 24/7. He has a job in actual life. You've got your 501st. They do a lot of community service. The Avenger cosplay group out of Northern California, Central California, they do a lot of community service. A lot of the Klingon groups do that as well. So how do you say that cosplay is deviant behavior when so much good is really coming from it? There's a man that was shown in Texas the other day on the news. In brief, I caught it. And he dresses and goes to hospitals and all his different... I love his Hulk costume. His Hulk costume is fantastic. And he does a lot of good. So perhaps next week when I come in, it'll be 6 to 7 p.m. again. Hopefully we'll get some more people wanting to discuss. Of course, anything's on the table, but I would love to talk cosplay. I would like to talk about how I feel. It's just part of the natural process of a participatory culture and the themed convention, and fans wanting to be part of that narrative. Fans who identify so strongly with a character that maybe has influenced their life in such a way that dressing like them is a way to honor them, but it's also a way to become them and take on more of those characteristics and partake in the myth. So that's a topic for discussion. I'm always open for more discussion on Star Trek and Star Trek Discovery coming up. Certainly more discussion on feminism, more to talk about certainly with Wonder Woman and some of the controversies surrounding Wonder Woman, like the lunchbox ban at the schools because superheroes are violent. Wonder Woman solves problems with violence. The UN controversy about appointing Wonder Woman as a global empowerment figure for women and girls, and of course then being stripped of that title and role, and of course the female-only showing of Wonder Woman. I think we're looking at bigger issues here, and certainly would like to open those things up for discussion. So with that, I will, and yes, Kat, I will certainly start writing a proposal for an X-Men course. You know, someone at HydroCon said something about it too, so I think it needs to finally happen. So I put that on my list of things to do, and I will work on that as well. So I'd like to thank people who have popped in and out. I've seen a couple of view changes up there with the little eye. So I'm going to leave this on the site. And, you know, this is now the launch of my official Geek to Geek forum, which will take place every Saturday evening from 6 to 7 p.m. Pacific time. Hopefully you'll join me as you know, as a fellow fan and someone who just likes to talk about, you know, comics and science fiction and anime and gaming and so on and so forth. And by the way, it is time for you to go ahead and continue enjoying Sci-Fi Saturday Night on MeTV. Wild Wild West just ended, which is your original steampunk series. Great show, and I love watching it. I used to see all these things on UHF, you know, growing up as a kid because we didn't have, you know, cable wasn't around yet. Of course, we'd watch all these old shows, so that's how I got into some of this as well. So enjoy Sci-Fi Saturday Night on MeTV, if that's where you're off to. I know I'm off to it because now Battlestar Galactica is on, followed by Wonder Woman with Linda Carter, and the original Star Trek, and so on and so forth into the wee hours of the night. I'm very sad they moved Batman to midnight because I'm not awake. Not that I don't have all the DVDs, and you know, so I can watch it. But yeah, thank you all for whoever's come in. Thank you for whoever may see this later and make some comments, maybe even some suggestions for how, you know, you'd like to see things go, and discussion topics, and, you know, open it up. Please use this. So I will be back here next week. Same bat time, same bat channel at 6 to 7 p.m. Pacific time with Geek to Geek Open Forum. Thank you.